Eris removed a palm-sized crystal ball from his storage ring and held it out in front of Zane.
Put your hand on the crystal ball. If it deems your talents worthy, it will react to you.
Zane's heart raced as he nervously complied. As soon as his fingertips made contact, he felt a wave of coldness wash over him. He took a steadying deep breath as he stared into the crystal ball. A few swirls of air formed inside it, and then they began to flow together. Gradually, the air began to condense and form a dark cloud, which produced a deluge of rain. Zane was puzzled by what he saw, as he had no idea what it might mean. Looking for answers, he glanced up at Eris, who was sporting a troubled frown. The older man then turned to Allura, who seemed equally stunned by what she had just witnessed. She shook her head in disbelief. She thought,
"That's impossible. Zane's swordsmanship is excellent, and he's also a talented alchemist. None of this makes any sense."
When Zane saw their bewildered expressions, he felt a knot forming in the pit of his stomach. Growing uneasy about the whole situation, he knew he needed to clarify his position.
I don't mean to press you, but does this mean I'm worthy of joining the Five Spirits sect?
Rather than responding straight away, Eris closed his eyes and took a moment to think. Eventually, he shook his head.
I'm afraid your talents are not advanced enough for you to join us. Your skills are only slightly above average, and that's nowhere near good enough. We should wrap this whole thing up now.
Zane's heart sank. His mind seemed to go blank, and a distracting buzzing noise filled his head, making him unable to think clearly. His expression mirrored his disappointment, and he seemed to visibly deflate.
"You saw the dragon shadow that appeared behind Zane. That's surely a sign that he has a high-grade spirit body. So how could he possibly be mediocre?"
Her question snapped Zane out of his stupor, and he looked to Eris for clarification, his eyes lighting up with a glimmer of hope. Unfortunately, he was disappointed all over again when Eris sighed and shook his head.
I overestimated how talented this young man is. That kind of shadow isn't necessarily an indicator that someone has a high-grade spirit body. Sometimes the martial arts techniques that a person cultivates can cause strange phenomena like that.
He noticed the crestfallen look on his niece's face and placed a comforting hand on her shoulder.
I know you're upset, but the Azure Dragon Academy isn't what it used to be. If we brought someone back with us who was lacking in talent, he'd only be a burden to us. It's time we head back to Burial Mountain. Your godfather has been awaiting your return.
Just as he managed to coax Allura to leave, Prince Jorah suddenly spoke up.
Would you mind letting me take the test? I believe I'm pretty gifted, so I'd be a much better choice than Zane.
Eris frowned as he didn't want to waste any more time. But since the request had come from a member of the royal family, he knew he had no choice. He sighed once again, then turned around to give the prince a chance to prove himself. He retrieved the crystal ball and held it out.
It's not as if it'll take long. Put your hand here.
Prince Jorah was overjoyed, and he hurriedly put his hand on the ball. Right away, it emitted a burst of black light, and a roaring liquid fire began to burn within the crystal. It looked as if it were going to burst out of the ball at any moment. Flames danced within the lava, seeming to reach for the sky. A colossal sword emerged amidst the inferno, while 6 bright stars appeared behind it. Eris's eyes widened in shock. He exclaimed,
A 6-star talent! This is amazing! I never expected to meet someone with that kind of prowess here. It looks like the Academy has struck gold after all. You must join me to train with the Five Spirits sect. With your talent, I'm certain you'll achieve great things.
Allura was also taken aback by what she had just witnessed, and she understood what it meant to be a 6-star talent. She looked over at Zane and felt a myriad of conflicting emotions wash over her. Fate really does like to toy with us, she thought, as she turned her attention to Prince Jorah.
If he takes up my uncle's offer, he's bound to soar to new heights. And who in their right mind would refuse to join such a legendary sect?
As expected, the prince happily accepted, laughing at Zane's misfortune. But judging by Allura's reaction to the turn of events, he could tell she had some kind of connection with Zane, so he was careful not to provoke her too much. He thought,
It doesn't matter. As soon as I leave with her and her uncle, I'll get my men to deal with that loser.
Zane's face was ashen. Although he had seen it all play out in front of him, he couldn't bring himself to accept the rejection. It was the closest he had gotten to solving the mystery behind his father's disappearance, and he knew he couldn't just give up, as he probably wouldn't get another opportunity. He cleared his throat to get attention, and Eris eyed him curiously.
Would I be able to join the sect if I could demonstrate that I'm talented enough? If you give me another 2 hours, I'm sure I can pass the test.
Eris saw the determination on his face, and it gave him pause for thought.
Talent is not something you can force, but you know what? For Elora's sake, I'll give you another 2 hours. After that, if you're still not up to standard, then you'll just have to accept it.
He wasn't expecting the second time to be any different, as he had seen hopefuls squander the chances they had been offered on numerous occasions. But as soon as he agreed to the terms, Zane waved his hand, and 3 marrow-purifying pills appeared in front of him. Zane tossed the pills into his mouth and gulped them all down at once. Then he shut his eyes and frowned in concentration. He tried to disconnect from his mind, body, and surroundings as he frantically began to utilize the dragon annihilation art. He knew that if Eris could see through his body, he would realize that his vital energy circulated in an unusual way. Zane's blood began to emit a huge amount of heat, and his face turned bright red as his breathing sped up. After engaging in the process for half an hour, his body didn't seem to have changed at all, but the flow of his vital energy was a little stronger than it was at the start. By the time an hour had passed, Elora started to lose all hope. Her heart ached for Zane, but the requirements for being accepted into the sect were there for a reason, and he had yet to prove that he was truly worthy of the honor. When another hour passed by uneventfully, Eris started to fidget with impatience. He already knew what was going to happen, so he didn't see any point in hanging around any longer. Eventually, he held his hand up in the air to stop the proceedings.
All right, you can stop now. We all know by now that you can't possibly pass the test.
Just as he finished his sentence, a sudden transformation surged within Zane. The dragon annihilation art had abruptly entered its second level. It was causing the aura around him to transform into something that threatened to engulf, annihilate, and destroy everything around them. An earth-shattering amount of power emanated from inside Zane, channeling itself in all directions. Above everyone's heads, countless dark clouds had gathered and were blocking the sun, causing the whole world to fall into darkness. A strong wind blew through the air, and everyone's hearts began to pound loudly in their chests.
Can't wait for more? Catch the next episode tomorrow. And if you are ready to binge the whole series, download our app now. Tap the link in our bio to start your journey.